What is up, guys? Delboy here. Just a quick preview / prediction for Carlos Takam versus Dereck Chisora. This fight is on the undercard of Joseph Parker versus Dillian Whyte. Let's briefly talk about both guys, their dimensions and their records, etc. Carlos Takam has a record of 35 wins, 4 defeats, 1 draw, 27 of those 35 wins coming by way of stoppage. Dereck Chisora has a record of 28 wins, 8 defeats, 0 draws, 20 of those 28 wins coming by way of stoppage. Carlos Takam is 37, whereas Dereck Chisora is 34. Despite Takam being the older man, and despite him having more fights, I feel Chisora has faded a lot worse. I think he's aged worse. You know, he's had a lot of tough defeats. He's been involved in some really hard fights. And I feel overall, despite him being the younger man, despite him having the less fights, I just feel overall he's taken a lot more punishment in his career in comparison to Carlos Takam. And as a result, he's a lot closer to being done as far as I'm concerned. Let's talk about the dimensions. So Dereck Chisora is listed as 6'1.5" with a 74-inch reach. He's an orthodox fighter. And Carlos Takam is listed as 6'1.5" with a 80.5-inch reach. He is also an orthodox fighter. So both of these guys are the same height, but Carlos Takam has a 6.5-inch reach advantage. For his height, Carlos Takam has very long arms, and I feel that, you know, this could play a factor in the fight. To me, Carlos Takam is quite well-rounded. He can fight on the inside, he can brawl, he can stick that jab and move, and he can be quite elusive. I feel when Carlos Takam actually uses his jab and his elusiveness, he makes for a hard target, and he really becomes an awkward proposition. Look at the fights with Povetkin. Although he lost that fight, you know, he did take rounds off Povetkin. He was boxing Povetkin quite well at times. And also the fights against Tony Thompson and Mike Perez, when he used his jab and tried to maintain distance and make for a hard target, you know, he had a lot of success. I feel if Takam fights like that, you know, this fight could be relatively straightforward for him. I feel he does need to maintain the range and use his jab in this fight. Because Chisora these days, he doesn't fight with that same intensity and that same aggression that he once did. You know, at one point in time, Chisora really used to be a bag of energy. He used to bob and weave a bit. He used to bounce on his feet, you know. He was a lot more active with his hands. Back in the day, he was almost viewed as a poor man's Joe Frazier. But these days, he's just a plodder. He comes forward, slow feet, slow hands. The output has dropped, and he's looking for those clubbing overhands, and it's really, really predictable. We saw in his last fight against Ajit Kabayel, you know, in that fight, I felt Chisora looked terrible. You know, he clearly lost that fight as far as I'm concerned. Believe it or not, there are some people out there who felt he beat Kabayel. I can't see that personally, but, you know, to me, Kabayel just outboxed him. He wasn't doing anything special. He was just maintaining range, catching Chisora coming in, you know, out-jabbing him and just outboxing him. Wasn't doing anything special, just moving and taking advantage of Chisora's slow feet, poor defense, no head movement, and low output, you know. Kabayel really exposed Chisora's weaknesses that night as far as I'm concerned. And it kind of made me think, what does Chisora even have left at this point? Because it's kind of hard to gauge with Chisora, because obviously he lost to Tyson Fury back in 2014 and he retired on his stool. When that happened, a lot of people were really questioning his future, but he came back against some journeymen. He got a few wins under his belt. Then he fought Kubrat Pulev in May 2016. Now, in the Pulev fight, he lost that fight by a split decision. There's no way that fight was a split decision. He clearly lost it. And I felt he looked terrible in that Pulev fight. And again, at that stage, people were saying, what does Chisora have left? Is he done? But again, he comes back from the Pulev fight, has a build-up fight, he gets a stoppage win, and then he fights Dillian Whyte in a grudge match. And Dillian Whyte was quite a substantial favourite in that fight, but the fight itself was a very close fight, could have gone either way, and at that stage it looked like Chisora had something left to give. But again, after the Dillian Whyte fight, He fought Caballero, looked terrible, and again it has me questioning what is there left. And I think it's hard to tell with Dereck Chisora. Going into this Takam fight, there's been no build-up, there's been no trash talk, there's been no bad blood. You know, is Chisora sufficiently motivated by this fight? Is he just taking it for a quick paycheck? You know, you got to ask yourself these questions, because I'm not sure. I've not got much hope that Chisora is going to put on much of a show. I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of be similar to how he was against Caballero. Slow of feet, slow of hand, low output, sloppy coming forward, defensively inept. And I could see Carlos Takam just picking him off with the jab and countering at will. And even if Chisora is motivated, I still make Carlos Takam a fair favourite. To me, Takam is just a lot more well-rounded. He's a lot better in terms of his technical ability. Defensively, more sound. I think Carlos Takam is just a better fighter, to be quite honest with you. And I think he has more left. I think he's more motivated. And I feel he's going to get the points win here. Also, on a side note, I've seen a lot of people online say that this fight could be the fight of the night and it could save the card and it's actually better than the main event. I'm not sure whether I really agree with that. Obviously, there's always a chance that this fight could turn out to be a great fight. That could happen. But I've got a gut feeling this fight is going to be pretty dull and pretty poor. I think Chisora, like I said earlier, is going to be undermotivated. He's going to be slow coming forward. He's going to be clumsy. He's going to be sloppy. And I feel Carlos Takam is just going to do what he does and outbox him. I could see a lot of clinching, a lot of holding, a lot of mauling. And when Chisora gets close, I could see him smothering his own work and it just turning into a clinch fest. I'm not too convinced that this fight is going to pan out to be a great fight personally, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's a good fight. And yeah, but I just see Carlos Takam winning this one. And I see him doing it quite handily on points. What do you guys think? Peace.